Give me back my mother's dog before I have you arrested. The command cut through the quiet street, with the certainty of someone who had never needed to repeat himself. Sadie Whitmore stopped walking. Basil, the aging mixed-breed rescue dog at her side, froze as well. The 12-year-old dog glanced once toward the towering man in the tailored charcoal suit, then quietly stepped behind Sadie's legs, pressing against her calves until only the tip of his grey muzzle remained visible. Across the driveway, 3 black luxury SUVs idled silently. 4 security guards waited for instructions. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Dominic Valenti stood motionless beside the open vehicle door, his expression perfectly controlled. At 43, the legendary head of one of the East Coast's most influential families looked exactly as the newspapers described him: impeccably dressed, broad-shouldered, intimidating without effort, and accustomed to immediate obedience. Governors returned his calls. Judges attended his charity galas. Business leaders postponed decisions until hearing his opinion. Yet at that moment, none of those things mattered, because one elderly rescue dog wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. Dominic extended a hand. "Basil." The dog answered with a low growl, before burying himself even farther behind Sadie. A ripple of awkward silence spread through the driveway. Vanessa Crowell folded her arms. "I believe," she said smoothly, "the attachment has become rather unhealthy." Sadie kept one hand resting lightly on Basil's shoulder. "No." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "No. The attachment is healthy," Sadie replied calmly. The routine around him wasn't. Vanessa's smile thinned. Interesting opinion for someone hired to walk a dog. Before Sadie could answer, Dominic spoke. "My mother employs dozens of professionals." His voice remained quiet. "Measured, controlled. We have veterinarians, house managers, personal assistants, medical staff." He looked directly at Sadie. "We do not require instruction from a dog walker." Sadie met his eyes without hostility. "Then why has Basil collapsed twice this month?" Silence. One of the house managers looked toward the ground. Dominic's jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" Sadie gently scratched behind Basil's ears. "The first collapse happened after his medication was delayed by almost 6 hours. No one spoke. The second happened after someone changed his food because the original brand wasn't available." Another silence. "And whoever made that decision never bothered reading his digestive restrictions." Dominic slowly turned toward the staff gathered near the entrance. "Is that true?" No answer came immediately. Finally, one assistant cleared his throat. "The veterinarian's schedule was difficult to coordinate." "So you improvised?" Dominic asked. "We believed." "You believed," Sadie interrupted quietly, "that he was just a dog." Every eye shifted toward her. She continued without raising her voice. "He isn't expensive because he's valuable. He's valuable because someone loves him." Basil leaned gently against her leg. Dominic watched the movement. The dog trusted her completely, not because she commanded him, because he had already chosen. Before Dominic could respond, the front door opened. Teresa Valenti stepped outside with the assistance of a polished walnut cane. Although recovering from a minor hip injury, she carried herself with unmistakable elegance. Silver hair framed a face marked more by kindness than age. The moment Basil saw her, his tail wagged enthusiastically. But instead of running toward her, he glanced first at Sadie, as if asking permission. Teresa smiled. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Only then did Basil trot carefully across the driveway, before returning almost immediately to stand between Teresa and Sadie. Dominic frowned. "Mother." Teresa ignored his expression. Instead, she looked toward Sadie. "Did he finish breakfast?" "Every bite." "Medication?" "On time." "Morning walk." 32 minutes. We stopped twice, because he became tired." Teresa nodded with quiet satisfaction. "Thank you." Dominic looked between them. You hired her. I did. Without informing me. I wasn't aware I needed permission to care for my own dog. You needed coordination. No. Teresa's voice remained warm. I needed someone who actually paid attention. Vanessa stepped forward. Mrs. Valenti, surely the household staff. The household staff, Teresa interrupted gently, fed him according to convenience. They walked him according to scheduling software. They medicated him according to calendar reminders. She looked directly at her son. No one asked how he felt. Dominic inhaled slowly. I hire the best people money can buy. Sadie finally answered. You hired expensive people. She paused just long enough for the words to settle. That is not always the same thing. Even the security guards avoided eye contact. Dominic had negotiated billion-dollar contracts. He had dismantled hostile acquisitions. He had stared down politicians. Yet no one had ever challenged him so simply, or so accurately. Teresa sighed. I've already dismissed the assistants responsible for Basil's routine. Dominic blinked. You what? I dismissed them. You made that decision alone? I made it after watching my dog become frightened inside his own home. She rested one hand on Basil's head. And after realizing that the only time he truly relaxed was when Sadie arrived. Dominic looked at Basil again. The dog wasn't watching Teresa. He wasn't watching the guards. He wasn't watching anyone else. His eyes never left Sadie, as though making certain she wouldn't disappear. Vanessa lowered her voice. Mrs. Valenti, emotional dependence like this can become manipulative. Sadie almost laughed. Basil weighs 54 pounds. He has arthritis. He sleeps through half the afternoon. If he's masterminding manipulation, he's remarkably committed to the role. A few staff members struggled to hide smiles. Even Teresa's lips twitched. Dominic, however, remained serious. So, what exactly do you expect? Teresa answered immediately. You have two choices. She pointed toward Basil. You may continue believing assistance can replace presence. Or, she met Dominic's eyes. You may spend the next 30 days caring for Basil yourself. Dominic stared. You cannot be serious. I've never been more serious. I run thousands of employees. And yet, Teresa replied softly, one elderly rescue dog doesn't know you. The sentence landed harder than any accusation. Dominic looked at Basil. The dog looked away. Something unfamiliar stirred beneath Dominic's practiced composure. Not anger, not humiliation, regret. Finally, he straightened his jacket. Fine. His voice carried the confidence of a man accepting an easy challenge. 30 days. I'll prove this is unnecessary. Teresa simply smiled. We shall see. The following morning, Dominic appeared at precisely 7 o'clock. He wore an impeccably tailored Italian suit, polished shoes, an expensive watch, and the expression of someone expecting efficiency. Basil glanced at him, then walked directly past him. The dog disappeared beneath Teresa's favorite reading chair and refused to come out. Dominic crouched. Basil, nothing. He tried treats, imported from Italy. Ignored. Premium organic food. Ignored. A handmade leather leash, worth more than most monthly salaries. Ignored. 20 minutes later, Basil still hadn't moved. Then the front gate clicked open. Sadie arrived carrying nothing more than a canvas shoulder bag and a travel mug of coffee. Basil immediately crawled out from beneath the chair. His tail wagged. He walked straight toward her. Dominic watched in disbelief. Why? Sadie clipped on Basil's ordinary leash before answering. She looked at Dominic with neither triumph nor pity. Because every time he sees you, she paused. Someone else is doing the caring. For the first time in many years, Dominic Valenti heard a criticism that neither power, wealth, nor authority could silence. and for the first time in even longer, he had no answer. Dominic Valenti had negotiated international shipping contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had settled disputes between rival corporations with nothing more than a 10-minute conversation. He had built an empire that stretched from luxury hotels to investment firms. Yet on the second morning of the 30-day challenge, he could not persuade one elderly dog to leave the front porch. Basil sat firmly beside Teresa's flower bed. The leash rested loosely in Dominic's hand. The dog simply stared ahead, neither pulling nor resisting, simply refusing. Dominic checked his watch. "We've been here for 11 minutes. Sadie took another sip of coffee. "I know. He hasn't moved. I noticed." Dominic frowned. "Shouldn't you help?" "I am helping." "How?" "I'm showing you that patience is part of the routine." Dominic looked unconvinced. "This is inefficient. So is arguing with a dog." Teresa laughed quietly from the porch. Dominic sighed. "I cannot spend half my morning negotiating with Basil." Sadie smiled. "Then stop negotiating." "What does that mean?" "It means he isn't refusing because he's stubborn." She knelt beside Basil. "He's waiting." "For what?" "For you to stop acting like you're late for something more important." Dominic opened his mouth, then closed it again, because she wasn't entirely wrong. Even standing in his own garden, he kept glancing toward his vibrating phone. Meetings, emails, construction reports, investment updates, security briefings. His world never stopped moving, but Basil wasn't interested in any of them. The elderly dog merely wanted someone willing to walk at his pace. Dominic slipped the phone into his pocket. He crouched beside Basil. For the first time, he said nothing. After nearly another minute, Basil stood. He stretched slowly, yawned dramatically, then began walking toward the gate, as though the delay had been completely reasonable. Sadie hid a smile. "Congratulations." "For what?" "You passed today's first lesson." "I did nothing." "Exactly." The third morning brought new problems. Dominic appeared wearing an immaculate navy suit, tailored in Milan. The trousers had sharp creases. His polished leather shoes reflected the morning sunlight. Even the security team looked impressed. Sadie looked horrified. "What?" She pointed toward the muddy trail leading through the neighborhood park. "You're walking there." Dominic glanced down. "I've walked on dirt before. Not with Basil." 15 minutes later, the expensive shoes were covered in mud. One trouser leg carried a perfect paw print. Dominic stared at the damage in silent disbelief. Sadie bit her lip. "You can laugh. I was trying very hard not to. You failed." "I failed." For the first time, Dominic heard her genuine laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't mocking. It was warm enough that several elderly neighbors turned to smile without even knowing the joke. The next challenge arrived unexpectedly. 3 black security SUVs followed them through the neighborhood, exactly as they would during any public appearance. Residents watched curiously. Children waved. Basil stopped walking. He glanced behind him, then calmly sat down. Dominic tugged gently. Nothing. Another gentle pull. Nothing. Sadie folded her arms. "He won't continue." "Why?" "Because your security detail is frightening him. They're protecting us. They're surrounding him." Dominic looked back. The convoy occupied almost half the street. 4 guards watched every passerby. One spoke continuously into an earpiece. For Dominic, it looked perfectly normal. For Basil, it looked terrifying. Dominic motioned toward his head of security. "Stay behind." The man hesitated. "Sir, you heard me. Protocol requires." "I said stay behind." The guards exchanged uncertain looks before stopping nearly 100 yards away. The moment the vehicles disappeared around the corner, Basil stood up. Without hesitation, he resumed walking. Sadie glanced sideways. The dog just won an argument against your entire security department. Dominic rubbed his forehead. I sincerely hope nobody reports that. As the days passed, Sadie introduced new routines. Medication came first. Not after breakfast. Not whenever convenient. Exactly on schedule. She demonstrated how to hide the tablet inside a small piece of scrambled egg. No force. No tricks. No rushing. Dominic copied her movements carefully. To his surprise, Basil accepted the medicine without protest. Interesting. What? He behaves differently for you. No. Sadie shook her head. I behave differently for him. The distinction lingered in Dominic's mind long after she finished speaking. Water always traveled with them. Not because Basil drank constantly, because elderly dogs tired unexpectedly. Dominic initially considered the extra bottle unnecessary, until one particularly warm afternoon. Halfway through their route, Basil slowed. His breathing became heavier. Without saying a word, Sadie stopped beneath a large oak tree. She offered water, then waited. No urgency, no impatience, only quiet observation. Dominic watched Basil recover. He realized something uncomfortable. His assistants would have continued walking. They would have reached the destination. They would have followed the schedule. Sadie had ignored the schedule entirely, because she was paying attention to the dog instead. Soon the neighborhood grew accustomed to seeing Dominic every morning. Without bodyguards nearby, few recognized him. To them, he was simply Teresa Valenti's son. An elderly woman watering roses waved cheerfully. Young man. Dominic turned. She handed him a biodegradable waste bag. Be responsible. He accepted it automatically. Only after she disappeared inside did he stare at the bag in his hand. I have chaired international economic summits. Sadie nodded solemnly. And now you've been promoted. Promoted? To responsible dog owner. She couldn't hold back her laughter. Even Dominic smiled. Just slightly. Later that week, they arrived at Monroe Veterinary Clinic for Basil's routine examination. Before they reached the entrance, someone called across the parking lot. Sadie! Caleb Monroe crossed the pavement, carrying a clipboard. The friendly veterinarian smiled warmly. Basil looks wonderful. He has an excellent teacher, Sadie replied. Caleb knelt to scratch Basil beneath the chin. And how's my favorite old gentleman? Basil wagged enthusiastically. Dominic noticed everything. The easy familiarity, the comfortable conversation, the effortless smile Sadie rarely showed strangers. Caleb stood. A few of us are having dinner at the community center Friday. He looked at Sadie. You should come. I'd like that. Before she finished speaking, Dominic interrupted. I'm afraid Basil may require additional observation Friday evening. Both Caleb and Sadie looked at him. Caleb blinked. The examination hasn't started yet. I prefer being cautious. Sadie glanced toward Basil. The elderly dog had already curled into a comfortable sleeping position. She looked back at Dominic. He's asleep. His condition could change. She folded her arms. Dominic. Yes? Jealousy isn't a veterinary emergency. I'm not jealous. No. No. She nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps you could stop glaring at Dr. Monroe's hand every time he pets Basil. Dominic looked down. Only then did he realize his jaw had tightened. Caleb, blissfully unaware, continued discussing vaccination schedules. Sadie smiled to herself. The most feared Mafia boss on the East Coast had just lost an invisible competition to a veterinarian. The final embarrassment of the week arrived after Basil's appointment. Dominic opened the rear door of his custom luxury SUV. Come. Basil looked inside. He sniffed the leather seats, then calmly turned away. Instead, he trotted toward Sadie's aging pickup truck. The faded blue vehicle carried scratches along one side. A blanket covered the back seat. Several tennis balls rolled across the floor. Basil jumped inside immediately. He circled twice before lying down with obvious satisfaction. Sadie shrugged. I guess he's made his decision. Dominic stared at the truck. My vehicle has heated seats. Silence. Climate control. Silence. Hand-stitched Italian leather. Basil yawned. Sadie opened the passenger door. You coming? Dominic looked once at his untouched luxury SUV, then at Basil occupying the back seat of the old pickup, like a retired executive refusing a company transfer. With quiet resignation, the legendary Mafia boss walked around the truck and climbed into the passenger seat. As Sadie started the engine, she glanced sideways. You know, what? I don't think anyone has ever outranked you before. Dominic looked toward the back seat. Basil was already asleep. He sighed. I've been replaced by a 12-year-old rescue dog. Sadie smiled. No, you've just been introduced to the actual boss. By the beginning of the second week, the neighborhood had quietly accepted something no newspaper would have believed. Every morning, at exactly 7 o'clock, the most respected Mafia boss on the East Coast could be found walking behind an elderly rescue dog that stopped every few minutes to sniff flowers, greet strangers, or simply admire the sunshine. No one applauded. No photographers appeared. No headlines followed. Yet those ordinary mornings began changing Dominic Valente far more than any boardroom victory ever had. One cool Tuesday morning, Basil unexpectedly slowed near a small wooden bridge overlooking a quiet pond. Instead of sitting down in protest, as he usually had during the first week, he simply looked up at Dominic. Without thinking, Dominic loosened his grip on the leash. You need a break? Basil wagged his tail once. Dominic smiled almost unconsciously. All right, Sadie noticed immediately. You didn't pull. I almost did. But you didn't. He watched Basil drink calmly from the portable bowl before answering. I'm beginning to understand. What? He's never refusing me. No. He's communicating. Sadie's smile carried unmistakable approval. Exactly. For the first time, Basil wasn't merely obeying Dominic. He was trusting him enough to expect that his signals would be understood. A few days later, Sadie handed Dominic the leash before they even left Teresa's driveway. You take him. You aren't coming. I'm walking beside you. Dominic hesitated. What if he refuses? Then you'll wait. What if he pulls away? You'll wait. What if... She laughed softly. Dominic. Yes? You've negotiated billion-dollar contracts. I'm aware. You can manage 20 feet of sidewalk. He almost smiled. I suppose that's statistically likely. Together they walked through the quiet neighborhood. For the first 10 minutes, Basil stayed comfortably beside Dominic. Not perfectly. Not obediently. Comfortably. The difference mattered. Near the community garden, an elderly man waved enthusiastically. Morning, Dom? Dominic looked surprised. You remember my name? The man chuckled. You've been carrying dog treats for 2 weeks. Hard to forget someone who shares snacks. After the gentleman disappeared, Dominic remained unusually quiet. Sadie glanced toward him. What are you thinking? I know every senator attending next month's fundraising dinner. And? I don't know the names of my mother's neighbors. The realization settled heavily between them. For years, Dominic had measured responsibility through financial support. Medical specialists, private nurses, professional drivers, beautiful homes, everything money could arrange. Everything. Except his own presence. That afternoon, they walked with Teresa. She moved slowly with her cane, while Basil wandered happily between them. Halfway through the route, Teresa stopped to chat with an elderly woman named Eleanor. The conversation lasted nearly 15 minutes. Flowers, weather, grandchildren. Nothing important. Everything important. Dominic waited patiently. On the way home, he asked quietly, "How long have they known each other?" Teresa looked surprised. "Nearly 18 years. 18? She nodded. "Eleanor brought soup after your father died." Dominic frowned. "I never knew. You never asked?" Her answer contained no anger, only truth. The following morning, Dominic arrived carrying 2 paper coffee cups. He handed one toward Sadie. She accepted it carefully. "You remembered." "I hoped I had." She took 1 sip. Plain coffee. No flavored syrup. No whipped cream. No artificial sweetener. She looked genuinely surprised. "You remembered everything." Dominic shrugged. "You once said, 'Complicated coffee makes busy mornings feel even busier.' I said that 3 weeks ago. I wrote it down." She blinked. "You wrote it down?" He looked slightly embarrassed. "I've discovered memory improves when I stop assuming I'll remember later." Sadie laughed softly. "I never expected the great Dominic Valenti to carry notes." "I also carry dog biscuits now." Remarkable progress. Later that week, rain interrupted their walk. Instead of rushing toward shelter, Sadie noticed one of her elderly clients struggling to lift 2 heavy bags of pet food from a car. Without hesitation, she crossed the street. "I'll help." Dominic followed automatically. The woman looked startled. "Oh dear, that's far too heavy." Dominic lifted both bags effortlessly. "Where would you like them?" Inside the modest apartment, an elderly golden retriever greeted them enthusiastically. Sadie knelt immediately to check the dog's sore hip. Dominic quietly carried the supplies into the kitchen. No cameras, no assistants, no applause. 20 minutes later, as they walked outside again, Sadie asked, "You didn't have to stay." "I know. Then why did you?" He considered the question. "Because leaving felt wrong." She looked ahead without speaking. Sometimes the greatest changes announced themselves through the smallest decisions. Several days later, while Basil rested beneath a maple tree, Dominic finally spoke about something he had avoided his entire adult life. "My father believed affection weakened leadership." Sadie remained silent. "He taught me that people respected certainty." "He wasn't entirely wrong." "No." Dominic watched leaves drift across the sidewalk. He said hesitation invited betrayal. Sadie nodded. "And kindness." He gave a humorless smile. He considered kindness useful only when strategically necessary. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, Dominic continued. "When my father became ill, I took control of the family businesses." "How old were you?" 31. "That's young. It felt necessary." "And after he died?" "I worked harder." "Why?" He answered almost immediately. "Because I didn't know what else to do." The honesty surprised even him. Sadie didn't rush to comfort him. Instead, she asked quietly, "When was the last time you visited your mother without checking your watch?" Dominic searched his memory. Nothing came. That afternoon, Sadie revealed something she had never shared before. "My grandmother raised me." Dominic listened carefully. "When she became ill, I helped care for her." She smiled faintly. "She also had an old dog named Murphy." "What happened?" "My grandmother passed away." "I'm sorry." "So was everyone else." She looked toward Basil, sleeping peacefully nearby. "People brought flowers. They attended the funeral. They hugged each other. And then they all went home." Dominic remained silent. Murphy sat beside her empty chair every evening. She swallowed gently. No one asked who would comfort him. The memory lingered in her voice. So I did. She smiled sadly. That was the first time I realized grief belongs to animals too. Dominic looked toward Basil. He lost your grandmother too. Yes, and everyone forgot. Almost everyone. She rested one hand on Basil's back. I promised myself I wouldn't forget the next one. Dominic suddenly understood something profound. Sadie had never chosen pet care because it was easy. She had chosen it because she refused to overlook the quiet heartbreak everyone else considered insignificant. Near the end of the third week, their conversation became unexpectedly personal. Sadie stared thoughtfully at the walking trail. I was engaged once. Dominic looked at her. He was embarrassed by me. She said it matter-of-factly. He liked my kindness. He liked how dependable I was. But he never liked introducing me. Dominic's expression hardened. He said people judged appearances. She smiled sadly. He wasn't wrong. No. He was just willing to agree with them. Dominic stopped walking. Sadie looked back. I've spent years watching people speak to me as though caring for animals somehow made me invisible. She shrugged gently. I'm used to it. No. Dominic's voice came quietly. You survived it. Their eyes met. There was no pity in his expression, only respect. Real respect. For reasons that had nothing to do with sympathy. That evening, Vanessa arrived unexpectedly at the Valenti estate. She found Dominic sitting on the back terrace. Basil slept peacefully beside his chair. Vanessa smiled politely. I've been looking everywhere for you. I was here. Several board members are waiting. They can wait another 15 minutes. She blinked. You've never said that before. Dominic looked toward the elderly dog. He falls asleep more easily when someone stays nearby. Vanessa stared. This dog has completely rearranged your priorities. Dominic gently stroked Basil's grey fur. No. He smiled quietly. He revealed what they should have been all along. The greatest proof of his transformation arrived the following morning. While crossing a busy intersection, a delivery truck slammed its brakes after another driver ignored a stop sign. The sudden noise startled Basil. The elderly dog flinched violently. Vanessa, who happened to be meeting Dominic nearby, instinctively raised her voice. Watch out! Basil immediately trembled. 3 weeks earlier, Dominic would have shouted orders to everyone around him. Instead, he slowly knelt beside the frightened dog. It's all right. His voice remained barely above a whisper. No one's rushing you. He waited. 1 minute, then another. He didn't tug the leash. He didn't command. He simply stayed. Eventually, Basil stepped closer, then rested his head gently against Dominic's knee. Sadie watched from only a few feet away. There was no audience worth impressing, no lesson to perform, no challenge left to win. This was simply who Dominic had become. Later, as they continued their walk, Basil grew tired. Without hesitation, he lay down beside Dominic's polished shoe. Within moments, he fell asleep. Sadie smiled. He trusts you now. Dominic looked at the sleeping dog, then slowly lifted his eyes toward her. I was hoping. His voice carried none of its usual certainty. Someone else might eventually do the same. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The morning breeze carried fallen leaves across the sidewalk. Basil continued sleeping peacefully at Dominic's feet, and for the first time since they had met. Silence no longer felt awkward between them. It felt like home. 3 months after Dominic completed the 30-day challenge, the idea that had once lived only inside Sadie Whitmore's notebook began spreading across the county. It started quietly. One retired teacher could no longer walk her Labrador after knee surgery. A widower with Parkinson's disease worried that his beagle would have to be surrendered to a shelter. An elderly couple skipped their own prescriptions so they could continue buying dog food. Sadie had seen these stories for years. No television cameras cared. No wealthy donors noticed. Yet she understood something many organizations overlooked. Most seniors did not fear growing old. They feared being separated from the companions who had remained loyal after everyone else had moved on. So she built something simple, a network of volunteers. Neighbors walking dogs, college students driving owners to veterinary appointments, retired nurses organizing medication schedules, families fostering pets during emergency hospital stays. Nothing glamorous, everything necessary. When Dominic learned about the project, he asked only one question: "What do you need?" Sadie answered without hesitation: "Not ownership. Partnership." The Valenti Family Foundation agreed to provide funding. Dominic signed the documents himself, but he insisted on one condition: the program belongs to the community. "It will never belong to my family." Sadie looked at him with quiet appreciation. "You remembered. I promised to ask instead of command." Within weeks, donations poured in. Local newspapers praised the initiative. Volunteers doubled. Veterinary clinics offered discounts. Businesses donated supplies. The project became known as the Whitmore Senior Pet Partnership. Soon, Martin Hensley, chairman of one of the state's most prestigious charity campaigns, requested a meeting. He arrived with photographers, marketing consultants, media advisors. Everything looked impressive. Martin smiled confidently. This could become one of the largest charitable campaigns on the East Coast. Sadie smiled politely. "I hope it helps more seniors." Martin nodded. "Of course." But his attention remained fixed on sponsorship banners and media schedules. He saw headlines. Sadie saw people. Planning meetings filled the following month. Dominic attended only when necessary. He preferred allowing Sadie to lead. Each time someone looked toward him for final approval, he redirected the question. "It's her program. Ask Sadie." At first, board members hesitated. Eventually, they stopped looking at Dominic altogether. Without realizing it, they had begun recognizing the true expert in the room. Vanessa noticed every change. She watched donors congratulate Sadie. She watched volunteers seek Sadie's opinion before anyone else's. She watched Dominic listening far more than speaking. Something about it unsettled her. For years, she had imagined herself standing beside Dominic at every important event. Instead, a plus-size dog walker had quietly become the most respected voice in the Foundation's newest project. 1 week before the public launch, Martin called an emergency planning session. The presentation schedule appeared on a large screen. Vanessa's name occupied the featured speaking position. Dominic would introduce the foundation. Several celebrity donors would appear afterward. Sadie scanned the agenda. Her name was missing. She looked toward Martin. "I believe there's been a mistake." "No mistake. I developed the program. You certainly contributed." "Contributed?" Martin smiled professionally. "Our donors expect polished public representatives. We've decided Vanessa will explain the project." Vanessa offered a sympathetic smile that never reached her eyes. "It's only about presentation. You'll still be recognized in the printed materials." Sadie understood immediately. Recognition had become decoration. Visibility had become negotiation. The people who actually built the program were expected to stand politely behind those who photographed better. She closed the folder. "I see." After the meeting, Vanessa found Sadie outside the conference room. "You handled that gracefully. I handled it honestly." Vanessa crossed her arms. You shouldn't take this personally. I don't. The public expects a certain image beside Dominic. Sadie waited. Vanessa lowered her voice. Caring for dogs may make you useful, but it doesn't make you suitable for his world. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Finally, Sadie smiled. A man's world isn't a prize women earn by becoming acceptable to him. Vanessa's expression stiffened. You really believe that? I know it. Then Sadie quietly walked away. She had spent too many years proving her worth through consistent work to begin begging for permission now. The morning of the charity gala arrived beneath clear autumn skies. Television crews filled the gardens surrounding the Valenti Foundation headquarters. Elegant guests greeted one another beneath white tents. Musicians played softly near the entrance. Volunteers organized registration tables. Sadie wore a simple navy dress. Nothing extravagant. Nothing intended to compete with anyone. She spent the first hour helping elderly participants locate seating, calming nervous volunteers, and making sure every senior citizen felt welcomed before the cameras arrived. Not one reporter recognized her. She didn't seem to mind. From the main stage, Martin welcomed donors. His speech lasted nearly 15 minutes. He praised generosity, corporate partnerships, leadership, innovation. Then Vanessa stepped forward. She began explaining the volunteer program. Halfway through her presentation, Dominic noticed something. She hesitated, twice. Someone asked how medication schedules were recorded. Vanessa glanced toward Martin. He answered vaguely. Another donor asked how volunteers were screened before entering seniors' homes. Martin smiled. We've developed excellent procedures. What procedures? He paused. No answer came. A third question followed. What happens if an elderly owner is hospitalized unexpectedly? Again. Silence. Dominic looked toward the back of the gathering. Sadie stood beside the volunteer table, helping an elderly woman adjust the leash on her aging terrier. She wasn't listening to the speeches. She was still working. Dominic stepped away from the podium. He crossed the stage without hurry, without anger. He stopped beside Sadie. What do you want me to do? She looked at him calmly. Don't defend my feelings. He waited. Defend the truth. Those 4 words settled everything. Dominic returned to the microphone. His expression remained composed. Mr. Hensley. Martin smiled confidently. Yes? Would you explain how volunteers report emergency medication changes? Martin blinked. Our staff handles those matters. How? Silence. Dominic continued. How are foster families selected? Another pause. What training do volunteers receive before transporting elderly animals? Martin cleared his throat. Our operations team. Which operations team? The audience shifted uneasily. Dominic never raised his voice. He simply continued asking questions whose answers only one person truly knew. Finally, he turned toward the back of the audience. Miss Whitmore? Every head turned. Would you join us? Sadie walked slowly to the stage. No dramatic music. No applause yet. Only quiet curiosity. Dominic stepped aside. The microphone became hers. For the next 20 minutes, Sadie explained everything. How volunteers were interviewed. How emergency contacts were verified. How medications were documented. Why elderly owners often delayed asking for help until they believed surrendering their pets was the only option. She didn't speak about statistics. She spoke about people. She introduced Margaret, whose cat had remained with her during chemotherapy because volunteers visited every evening. She introduced Harold, whose arthritis no longer prevented his Labrador from enjoying daily walks. She introduced college students who had become weekly companions to lonely seniors after initially joining only for community service hours. By the time she finished, many guests had tears in their eyes. Then Teresa slowly approached the microphone. "I would like to tell you something." The audience fell silent. "When I injured my hip, everyone tried managing my life." She smiled toward Sadie. "This young woman did something different. She preserved it." The room answered with warm applause. At that exact moment, Basil wandered onto the stage. He ignored photographers, ignored celebrities, ignored Vanessa completely. Instead, he walked directly toward Sadie, then sat proudly beside her feet. Laughter spread gently through the audience. No one needed an explanation. The dog had just voted. Martin attempted one final recovery. Regardless, he forced a smile. Miss Whitmore remains, after all, only the hired dog walker. Dominic looked toward him. His voice remained calm enough that the silence became louder than shouting ever could. "That describes her profession." He paused. "It does not limit her contribution." The audience applauded immediately. Not because Dominic ordered them, because everyone had already witnessed the truth for themselves. Several volunteers then approached the stage carrying folders. One by one, they described how Martin had repeatedly removed community contributors from promotional materials, how local organizers disappeared from official reports, how photographs highlighted executives while ignoring the people doing the work. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Within minutes, an emergency vote was called. Martin Hensley was removed as campaign chairman. Immediately afterward, the committee unanimously appointed Sadie Whitmore as executive director of the Whitmore Senior Pet Partnership. She accepted with visible surprise. Not triumph. Gratitude. As guests slowly departed, Vanessa approached Dominic one final time. "You've changed." "I have. She made you look ordinary." Dominic smiled faintly. "No." He watched Sadie laughing with volunteers across the lawn. "She taught me how to behave decently." He looked back at Vanessa. "Those aren't the same thing." Vanessa followed his gaze toward Sadie. For the first time, she realized she had spent years admiring Dominic's influence. Sadie had simply cared about Dominic himself. One ambition sought power. The other transformed a person. And everyone present had witnessed which one endured. Winter slowly gave way to spring, without press releases, without charity galas, without anyone announcing another success. The Whitmore Senior Pet Partnership simply continued doing what it had promised. Every morning, volunteers knocked on doors carrying leashes instead of cameras. College students drove elderly owners to veterinary appointments. Retired nurses organized medication reminders. Emergency foster families opened their homes whenever a hospital stay separated someone from a beloved companion. The program no longer depended on publicity. It had become part of the community itself. Dominic made certain of one thing. Every donation from the Valenti Foundation remained completely transparent. Every financial report was public. Every operational decision belonged to Sadie and her team. When several executives suggested giving the foundation permanent authority over the partnership, Dominic rejected the proposal before the discussion could continue. It was never built to belong to us. The matter ended there. His own routine had changed just as quietly. Every Sunday morning, Dominic arrived at Teresa's home before breakfast. No assistants. No security convoy parked along the street. Usually only one vehicle waited discreetly several blocks away. He carried Basil's leash himself. Waste bags occupied one coat pocket. Dog treats occupied the other. Sometimes neighborhood children ran toward him before Basil even noticed. "Morning, Mr. Dominic." He answered every greeting. He knew nearly everyone's name now. Mrs. Eleanor still insisted on giving Basil homemade biscuits. Mr. Jenkins continued pretending Basil enjoyed listening to stories about baseball. Dominic never hurried them anymore. He had finally learned that conversations, like elderly dogs, followed their own pace. One bright Saturday, Sadie arrived at the veterinary clinic, carrying two nervous rescue puppies. Before she reached the entrance, she noticed Dominic already waiting with Basil. "You came early." "I wanted Basil to settle before the appointment." She smiled. "6 months ago, you would have sent 3 assistants." "I know. And probably scheduled the visit for exactly 12 minutes. "I know." She laughed. "I like this version better." "So do I." Neither of them realized how naturally those words had been spoken. Inside the clinic, Caleb Monroe completed Basil's examination. The veterinarian smiled while reviewing the chart. "Excellent weight. Healthy heart. Arthritis hasn't progressed." He scratched Basil gently beneath the chin. "I couldn't ask for better care." Dominic thanked him sincerely. As Caleb finished writing the report, he turned toward Sadie. "I've been meaning to tell you something." She waited. "When we first met, years ago," he smiled warmly, "I hoped one day I'd be the man standing beside you." Dominic quietly looked away, giving them privacy. Caleb continued. "But somewhere along the way," he glanced toward Dominic kneeling beside Basil, "I realized someone else had already learned how." Sadie's expression softened. "You deserve someone wonderful too." He laughed. "I'll manage." Then he extended his hand toward Dominic. "Take good care of her." Dominic accepted the handshake firmly. "I intend to." There was no rivalry, no bitterness, only mutual respect between two men who recognized goodness in each other. Across town, Vanessa prepared to leave the Valenti Foundation. Her resignation surprised many people. Teresa visited her office on the final afternoon. "I wanted to say goodbye." Vanessa smiled faintly. "I spent years believing influence created happiness." Teresa remained silent. "I was wrong." She looked toward a framed photograph of one of the Foundation's earliest charity events. "I admired Dominic because everyone admired Dominic." A pause. "I never asked whether anyone truly understood him." Teresa reached across the desk and squeezed her hand gently. "We all spend part of life learning the wrong lessons." Vanessa smiled through quiet regret. "I hope I've finally begun learning the right ones." She left, with dignity, not defeated, simply wiser than before. A few weeks later, Sadie prepared to reduce her daily visits. The partnership had grown. New volunteers completed training every month. Basil no longer required supervision during his walks. Dominic handled every medication, every meal, every appointment without reminders. One afternoon, she closed her notebook. "I think we're finished." Dominic looked unusually unsettled. "Finished?" "My job here." He glanced toward Basil, sleeping beneath a blooming cherry tree. "He doesn't need lessons anymore." Sadie smiled. "No, he doesn't." Silence settled between them. Finally, Dominic spoke. "I do." She looked at him. "I still need them." The following Sunday, Dominic invited Sadie and Teresa to the small park where everything had begun months earlier. No photographers waited. No security guards surrounded the entrance. Only morning birdsong drifted through the trees. Basil wandered ahead, happily sniffing familiar benches and flower beds. Dominic carried something folded carefully beneath his arm. When they reached the old wooden bridge overlooking the pond, he stopped. "I have something for you." He handed Sadie a simple leather folder. She opened it slowly. Inside rested several handwritten pages. Not contracts, not financial documents, not deeds to expensive properties. A walking schedule. She turned the first page. Basil's medication routine, his favorite walking paths, the foods he should never eat. The signs that meant his joints were becoming sore. Every detail written neatly by hand. The next page listed Teresa's preferred visiting times, the names of every neighbor she spoke with, birthdays, medical appointments, community events. Another page followed, Sadie's coffee order, the names of her elderly clients, the anniversary of her grandmother's passing. the date Murphy had died. The morning each volunteer preferred beginning work. Everything she had once mentioned casually during ordinary conversations. Everything he had chosen to remember. Tucked inside the final page rested a small velvet box. She looked up. Dominic wasn't kneeling. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply stood before her with complete honesty. I spent most of my life believing love meant making sure nothing escaped my control. He glanced toward Basil, lying peacefully in the grass. You taught me something entirely different. His voice grew quieter. It means caring enough that someone remains completely free to stay. He opened the velvet box. Inside rested a simple platinum ring. Elegant, uncomplicated, exactly like the promise behind it. I won't ask you to become someone different. I won't pretend your work is small. I won't hide loving you because other people might judge appearances. I won't replace conversation with instructions. I won't disappear after life becomes ordinary. He smiled gently. I've learned ordinary moments matter most. Sadie's eyes filled with tears. Dominic took one slow breath, then asked the only question that truly mattered. Would you choose to walk beside me? He smiled toward Basil. Even on the days I forget who's really holding the leash. For several seconds she couldn't answer. Then laughter escaped through her tears. Basil has always been holding it. Dominic laughed softly. I suspected as much. She slipped the ring onto her finger. Yes. Yes? I'll walk beside you. Not because of your name. Not because of your family. Not because of your success. She stepped closer. I'll walk beside the man who learned how to stay. They embraced quietly. Behind them, Teresa pretended to become fascinated by the ducks on the pond. 1 year later, the Whitmore Senior Pet Partnership had become a permanent non-profit organization, serving thousands of elderly pet owners across the region. Volunteer dog walking, transportation to veterinary appointments, medication reminders, emergency foster care, pet food assistance, weekly companionship visits. The walls inside the headquarters displayed photographs, not of donors, but of seniors smiling beside the animals they had never been forced to surrender. Dominic continued funding the organization. He never attended board meetings unless invited. He never voted on operational decisions. Whenever reporters praised his generosity, he always redirected the conversation. The partnership belongs to the people who built it, not the people who financed it. Every Sunday morning, he still walked Basil through the neighborhood. He carried waste bags. He waited whenever Basil stopped to admire flowers. Sometimes the old dog rested halfway home. Dominic always sat beside him without complaint. Teresa often watched from her front porch. She smiled each time. In her opinion, the greatest transformation in Valenti family history had never involved business. It had happened one quiet morning when her son finally learned that presence could never be delegated. During an interview celebrating the partnership's anniversary, one reporter asked the question everyone expected. Mr. Valenti, when did you realize Sadie Whitmore had changed your life? Dominic looked across the courtyard. Sadie knelt beside an elderly golden retriever, laughing with its owner. He smiled before answering. The day I stopped asking why the dog trusted her more than me. The reporter waited and started asking what she had done to earn that trust. Inside the partnership office, 2 framed items hung side by side. The dismissal order Dominic had once prepared for Sadie, and the handwritten walking schedule he had used when proposing. Between them rested a small bronze plaque. He believed loyalty followed power. She taught him loyalty follows care. Late that afternoon, Dominic, Sadie, and Basil began walking home together. Halfway down the sidewalk, Basil stopped. He refused to move. Dominic sighed with theatrical resignation. He still likes you better. Sadie reached for Dominic's hand. No, she smiled warmly. He simply has excellent judgment. Dominic laughed. That makes two of us. Only then did Basil stand. With his tail wagging gently, the elderly rescue dog continued down the sidewalk. This time, the most respected Mafia boss on the East Coast didn't lead the way. He simply walked beside the plus-size woman who had taught him that love could never be commanded, only earned through patience, kindness, and the quiet courage to keep showing up long after every dramatic moment had passed.